Welcome to the Conduit Deeper podcast, a podcast that takes a deep dive into the details that surround our current sermon series, from current events to fascinating finds to conversations that take us deeper into the Word. Thanks for joining us.
Welcome to the Deeper Podcast. My name is Mo, Executive Pastor at Conduit Church, joined with our lead pastor, Darren Tyler. And this week, a special guest, a friend, is joining us, Mr. Caleb Baldree.
What's up?
Thanks for joining us, Caleb.
Thanks for having me.
I'm curious kind of how this all came together. The reason Caleb's here is Darren went to Israel this past week. As many of you may know already, we talked about it on Sunday. Had an incredible opportunity to check out everything that's happening over there with some of our friends, and we'll get into those details in a second. But somehow, Caleb found himself in Pakistan. Can I say that?
Yeah.
With our missions pastor within 24 hours, 24 to 36 hours later, you find yourself back home and then back in Israel in the Middle East. How did that come together? Like, what's the deal here?
I guess I've been doing, I'm not even sure how many trips I've been on now in a year and a half. I think that was my 7th international trip.
Oh, man.
Doing video. And so Eric and I were in Pakistan, and I think it was the day that I was packing for Pakistan. I get a text from Darren saying, "We're leaving the 13th. Can you come?"
Wow.
And actually, no, that's not true. You were asking me if I could go. I was in Pakistan with Eric, and then a couple days before we were leaving.
Well, it started as we thought, because I thought it was going to be the 15th.
Mm-hmm.
And so, in that case, you would have 3 days home, which is, by the way, that's still a big ask. I'm in Pakistan for 12 days, come back to America, then go back 3 days later. And then literally out of nowhere, I get this call saying, "Oh, yeah, here, the dates are 13th. And I actually didn't know if how am I going to do this? Like, Mo had to come in at the last second to fill in for me. And there was a moment of like, I can't not. But then, I'm texting you going, "Hey, so it's actually the 13th. And,
Yeah.
Yeah.
You said yes. So
I said yes. I'm an easy yes on these trips. But yeah, I come home. I have 36 hours between coming home and getting on a plane to Miami, then to Tel Aviv. So yeah, that's all.
And your goal, the goal of bringing Caleb along, obviously, is to help document. That's what you do. You're a bit of a documentarian. That's a big word.
yeah.
I can't spell it.
Yeah, but you're good at it.
And you're really good at it, capturing video and putting together these stories. Basically, you're telling stories through video, and you do such an amazing job. And so, for you to be able to go last minute on this trip,
It was it was important because when it originally came about, I didn't ask Caleb initially because I thought, well, first of all, I thought you were going to be there a little bit longer. I didn't think it was going to work. So I blew through multiple asks for people to go with me, and not surprisingly, nobody said yes to it. Some of it was, I'm working, but most of it was, are you out of your mind?
yeah.
And Caleb was like, yes.
Yeah. I'm an immediate yes.
Yeah.
Let's head right into danger. Why not?
Well, the thing that Caleb has picked up on around here, our culture, is we call it keeping your yes on the table. If God's opening a door, yes is the only answer. And by the way, the people that said no, it wasn't, God just didn't greenlight them. And because one of the things I did say with anybody is like, if you say yes, that's great, but I need your wife to tell me that she's okay with it too. Mm-hmm. And Caleb is not married yet, but we still had to run that, I think, by
My
significant other. Can we say girlfriend?
Girlfriend, yeah.
Okay, we're there yet.
She was immediate yes, though.
Yeah.
Which is
maybe she's the keepers with that.
yeah,
means.
that's the encouraging thing.
How did this trip come together on your end, Darren? Like, what? Obviously, it was last minute, but can you give a little bit of context on who it was with, why you went, and how it all came together?
Yeah, I can. The body of Christ right now is coming together. Weirdly, almost like COVID, like people that you would never think would be in the same room, based on many theological things. But when you are around a common enemy, then it's suddenly amazing how fast the things that don't matter fall away. And so, there's a guy named Todd who still works for Paula White Ministries in Florida, and many people know her as the pastor to President Trump, or the pastoress. Is that what it is? Female pastoress. And I've actually known of Randy and Paula since she was there's a whole other life where Paula was pastor of a church with her husband, and now she's married to the dude from Journey. So in a weird irony, the guy that wrote "Don't Stop Believing," right, the title of our First John series, it's his wife's ministry that Todd had worked for. But anyway, they came, they meaning Todd, and if you guys remember, you're around Iftach and his kids from southern Israel. And they just, when they were here, I was like, look, if there's any way that I can come and see you there, just know that I'm an immediate yes, whenever that is. I would love it if it was sooner than later.
I think that day, too, I don't know if you remember this, that day I saw you and I was like, hey, if you're going to Israel, let me know.
Yeah.
So.
That's true. I forgot that. So you kept your word.
Yeah.
So it came about that. So this organization is called CityServe. And the thing that makes them really helpful in Israel is they actually are a fully recognized Israeli version of a 501c3 inside of Israel, which you desperately need to work inside of Israel. Like they are not excited about, as a government, about Christian missionaries. Like saying you're a missionary there is actually not a selling point. Now, the major difference between that and saying like an Islamic country is they'll still let you in. But there are restrictions around churches, which is why most of the churches in Israel are called like house of prayer. Like you'll see these houses of prayer. But that's it. That was how Todd said, "Hey, yeah, we want to go over there. We want to." We've given him $200,000 at this point. So one of the things that's important is make sure that the money you said is going where you said it was going to go. So
yeah, and to connect the dots, Todd and his team were here a month and a half, 2 months ago. If you remember our previous interview that we had on our podcast, and on a Sunday, we had Todd and the Gepner family join us to tell us their story of what they experienced on October 7th. And so it was in that meeting that the relationship formed, and this opportunity rolled out of that, which then allowed you guys to visit the Gepners' home. Yeah. In their neighborhood. I always forget the name of what they call the neighborhood.
Theirs was called a mashav.
In Ebsor.
Yeah, the name of the town is in Ebsor.
In Ebsor.
So you got to go boots on the ground to the village, in essence, the neighborhood that was
farm
attacked.
Town,
that was attacked, and we're able to learn more about, very up close and personally, the impact and, quite frankly, the evil that took place that day.
Yeah, we were on the border of Gaza, like
how close?
Less than a kilometer.
Yeah, one of the villages we went to, I think it was less than a kilometer. You could see the actual Gaza destruction. You could see the rubble. You could see. I borrowed a zoom lens from the photographer that was there, and I could actually zoom in and see it.
Yeah. 1,000 feet away.
You could hear gunfight, the whole thing.
Yeah, we're talking like the distance of here to 840.
Sure.
Like it's right there. Like you can see it. There's the fence. There's the, and so we were, and Ebsor was like sort of the main operating base, but we hit 2 or 3 other. The one I can remember the name of was Kafar Aza, and it was one that was just absolutely obliterated. A town of 950 people, and the best estimate that they have was it was at least 300 terrorists in their town. So it's honestly amazing that anyone survived.
Yeah,
because it was an ambush. Right?
Oh, yeah.
With machine guns and bombs and RPGs
and paratroopers. They had people come from the sky.
Which is part of what I wanted to. The stories that we're hearing, and by the way, if you've got kids and you've got this on in your car, this might be one that you maybe listen to later.
Or if you're watching YouTube at home, maybe you pull up the podcast. Maybe part of your routine is to pull up the podcast and watch as a family after dinner.
Yeah.
Maybe not.
This wouldn't be the one. It depends. You know your kids, but I want to be able to speak very freely as to what happened.
Yeah.
That we saw with our own two eyes, we heard with our own ears, we smelled with our own nose, like we were there. And so I don't want to whitewash it. And to that end, like, we also don't want to leave it as just the hopeless stuff. So we want to say, like, this is what happened. This is what we saw. This is what the second is, like, this is what Israel as a government is doing and, did or didn't, should or shouldn't do.
Right.
And then third is, what are we going to do as a church? Like, what do we get to do as a part of this? And so, that's the flow that we're going to go with today. And I've got some video clips. So if you're listening on Spotify, you'll be able to hear the voices, but this is also one that might be better for you to consume on YouTube, because there's some visuals that we're going to show here, something we've never really done before. But our Crack Commando Unit producer team over here, Micah and Caleb, figured it out. So you'll get to see what we saw. And by the way, I want to clarify, just so you know, the footage you're going to see, I shot with my iPhone. So if you're like, man, Caleb blows, man. It's like, that's terrible.
We brought Caleb all the way over last minute to shoot on his iPhone.
Just so he could hold his phone wrong when he video records. Yeah, like, this is 52-year-old video recording. So
that makes more sense.
Yeah, we'll have some more high-quality things or whatever, but that being said, this is not that.
So take us through it. So you get there, you arrive, and are you immediately whisked away in an armored vehicle, or I mean, like logistically, how
a party bus?
How quickly did you get to the neighborhood, and what was some of the first things you felt or saw?
So we arrived on a Sunday night and stayed in a hotel in Tel Aviv.
Okay,
and it's so wild. I don't know if you've ever been, anybody, in a country that's at war, civil war, whatever. But it's like life weirdly goes on. I mean, you still have to go to the grocery store. Like, things have to happen, and so that's what's happening. Like, there's going to grocery stores, going to hotels, and but I'll say the first thing that struck me was the hotels are full of families who have been displaced, Israelis, who can't go home because it's not safe. So, like, I'm just trying the mental picture, but like, you're like the hotel lobby. And by the way, the Israeli hotels, they're made for tourists. Like, the food is glorious. But you walk in and there's like, I don't know, 100 scooters, like little kid scooters, because there's kids everywhere. And you've got families, 4 or 5, kids, whatever, in a hotel room, not like a suite. And so this is their lives. Again, kids are resilient, so they're zipping around on their motorized scooters and in and out dinner, and
they're interacting with like the hotel guests. Like, I was watching kids going up to like the guy who was, I guess, the doorman or whatever, and they're like going up to them, and he was making them laugh. I mean, it was like we were walking into just a community. But these are all basically just refugees from their own country that we just stay in a hotel with.
And one of the first clues that you get that something's wrong is dinner. Because, again, the hotels, the food on a trip when you're doing a tour trip is unbelievable. Like, amazing. But, like, think about it. If you've got, like all the neighborhood kids are coming over and, Jenny's like, oh, geez, I got, like, all these football kids. So what do? You cook up pile of spaghetti.
That's right.
Spiral noodles, whatever, and sauce. And so like the hotel buffets that are normally full of like, lamb.
The quality is decreased.
Beef, and it's like, would you like a pile of spiral noodles, or would you like spaghetti noodles and then some sort of indeterminate fish kind of thing?
Yeah.
And now that said, there were, I will say that a couple of the hotels, they were so glad to see us. One of them, they put us in like our own little room. And it's like a Mediterranean D-Day invasion of food, like just wave after wave of food. We're like, I'm over here waving the white flag, like, stop, we can't eat any more of this.
That's the best thing about Israel is like the fruits and vegetables are like the best in the world. Everything tastes incredible, and they were so excited. I think we were literally like the first tourists.
They were
in 6
so
months.
grateful because their entire industry has been shut down, and so they were excited. So anyway, we stayed the night in Tel Aviv, and then the next morning, early on, we headed straight for the Gaza border.
And at the Gaza border, you're then ushered into these neighborhoods. And did you meet up with, so a part of CityServe is obviously Todd, and then the Israeli outpost is that led by Yuri? Am I remembering this correctly?
Yep, Uri. He and it turns out the guy spent a bunch of time in the United States working. He worked for the Israeli Tourist Department, and so he sponsored like Winter Jam.
Oh wow!
Like he knows he knows Justin Fratt, Rod Riley, Troy Van Leer. I was like, wait, what? How did you know that? So we had a lot of the same friends. So so he's there, and he's former IDF as well.
Okay.
And I mean, it's like Israel is full because of they're constantly and have constantly been in a defense mode. Everybody's in shape. Like, you know, we're eating dinner that first night, and you look down, there's like 100 people. It's like 10 o'clock at night, and they're running in groups, but they're like, you know, doing like sprints outside and stuff. So anyway, and you know, Uri's one of those guys, just top shape, not screwing around. So yeah, he's there. Todd Lamir is there. Daniel Klein, who is the CEO of Catalyst, is with us, and then two pastor friends of mine were there as well, John Breland and Rob Rogers. And am I forgetting anyone? I think it was it.
Was it? Yeah.
And again, I invited a few pastors, and I was joking with John Breland, like, I can't get the guy to go fly fishing with us, but go to Gaza?
Yeah,
he didn't even hesitate. Yeah, I'm in. Like, you might need to see your therapist about this, man, because you won't go fly fishing, but you'll go to Gaza.
So tell us what you saw. I mean, what did you walk into this compound, not compound neighborhood, because it's all blocked off and walled off, which probably loosely walled off.
Well, I think we actually started at the Nova Festival first.
Oh, that's right. You're right.
So the first thing we went to was one of the most devastating places that got attacked, and it was basically a music festival, Israeli music festival.
And that's the one that got the most coverage, the festival that was attacked from paratroopers and all of that.
And it was called the Nova Festival, and I mean it's right on the border. It's right next to Gaza, and so that was the first place we went, and it was kind of a shocking first place to start because there's a lot of military presence there. So they have like tank cannons right there on the property. They have IDF everywhere. They have, and then we go in and then we get off the bus that we're on, and you're hearing gunfire like from Gaza. You're having the cannons shooting over our heads. So you're just hearing boom. Yeah. So like
mortars going off.
Like every minute you're hearing
wild,
boom.
Dude. Like we were there for 12 seconds. And you can it's like the subs in the front row of a rock and roll concert. You just felt it in your chest.
And you could see the trees, and you just see the smoke coming up from God. Like you're at that moment, it was a moment where it's like, okay, me personally, I'm a wartime correspondent in this second.
Right.
We're in a war zone. And in that area, they have these stakes in the ground, and has pictures of people who were either murdered or taken from the Nova Festival just all around. And so we just walked, between pictures of people.
It's like a makeshift memorial. And so each photo on a little small post has the name, brutally murdered, what happened to them, their age, their birthday, or taken hostage, and it was holy ground. Like 300 people were murdered there. They don't know how many, but hundreds of women were brutally sexually assaulted.
Yeah,
tortured.
Yeah.
The New York Times reported this. And we heard these stories as well, where once they had their way with a woman, they, and this is, I'm telling you, if you've got kids, this is your last chance. Inserting the barrel of their weapon inside of the woman's lady parts and killing them that way, shooting straight up through the top of their head. It was just the way that they tortured. One of the guys said, even animals aren't this cruel. Like animals, so it's even less than animals, which I thought that's very appropriate because this is demonic. This is 100% evil straight from the pit of hell. And when I hear people say, yeah, but what about Israel? Israel is, as a government, as a military, it is above my pay grade to know what is right, wrong in that. But what I do know is this. If they don't destroy Hamas, specifically this organization, we can talk about the other stuff, whatever, but this organization, they're coming back. Like, this is not, so they are bombing Gaza. They are. But if someone has a better plan, like the MSNBC guys, if they've got an option that I'm unaware of, I'm wide open to hear this information. But for now, what they've got to do is root this out. So yeah, there are people dying inside of Gaza, and it's Hamas's fault. Like, if you are pro-Palestinian, you have to be anti-Hamas.
Yeah, I think that's a good distinction. I think it's a good reminder, because I do believe that is consistently being blended together and mixed up, and people not understanding the key difference in Palestinians and Hamas. Those are two separate groups.
Even the West Bank and Gaza are different groups.
Yeah.
Like, these are all different places. And there's something that, I'm sure we'll get into like this a little bit later, but like, there was something that I shared with you when we were there. We were walking around. I don't remember if it was Nova or somewhere else, but I always mess up her name, Elisa Schilders. She said something at a conference here, actually. She said, it's not about right and wrong. It's about truth and lies. Like, rights and wrongs in 2024 can be subjective. Everyone has a little bit of a different perspective. What's right here is the right, maybe not right in a different country, whatever. But we're talking about truth and lies, right? Which are biblically based. And the truth is that what happened on October 7th is some of the worst. I mean, some of the stories that we heard were some of the worst things I've ever heard. I mean, they're playing soccer with body parts. It's just crazy. Specifically
cutting off the breasts of women while they're alive.
Yeah.
And kicking their breasts like soccer balls.
Yeah. Or they told us one story, like they put a baby in an oven and cooked it alive. I mean, just crazy things, right? And so, like, the truth is this wasn't just an attack. This was the deliberate attempt to torture and harm innocent people. And that's the truth. And so when people are talking about Israel and they're talking about the Israeli government or issues, that you can have opinions there, and I think that's fine. But like, we're talking about the people, and what we met was the people of Israel. And the truth is that what happened was horrific, and something has to be done about that.
Yeah, nobody back in the 2015s, whenever it was, I don't remember any of these knuckleheads, Shane Claiborne, Marty Duran, these Christian voices, let alone the voices of the secular media, calling for a ceasefire against ISIS, because ISIS was evil, and in doing so, innocent lives were lost in fighting ISIS. But if you weren't calling for a ceasefire then and you are now, you might want to check yourself. Because this, and this is true of the Houthis, the Hezbollah, Boko Haram, Hamas. I mean, I could go on. Every one of these extremist Islamic groups have made no secret as to what they want. And it's Islamic Caliphate, which means a world ruled by Islam. Does every Muslim in the world want that? Yes, maybe not in the way like you would say Christian nationalism. I would love the country. We have a lot of Christians that were in office, whatever. I think most Muslims believe that the ways of Allah are good, and so the world would be better if it was ruled by Islam. I think that's a case that a lot of Muslims would make. But then there's this group inside of Islam that are extremists, and they pop up everywhere. This is the problem that Islam has never been able to address, and it hadn't been able to address it because it's a false religion. And the logical conclusions of the teachings of Muhammad lead to, and actually, let's just why don't we how about we do this? Let's take a tour through Kafar Aza. Okay, so Ein Abzor is the first place we go. That's the place where Iftach and his kids lived. And they repelled the attack. So the only kibbutz, and they're so humble about it. They're like, we're not heroes. The only reason is because, and they're right about this, like they knew about the attack because there was a couple of them that got hit first. So it gave them like a couple of minutes to fight ahead. But what's happening now is Ein Abzor, which means, Abzor in Hebrew we learned means gospel, wild, is the one village. And so the goal would be, let's make this the forward operating base for the other villages to rebuild and to build safety.
And the villagers look at them as that.
Yeah.
I mean, that was the thing that was really fascinating, was like, because they look at Ein Abzor and they say, this was a miracle. That's the language that they used. They said, what happened was a miracle, that no one was lost, that they were able to protect themselves. I mean, they shot a mortar, they shot guns into this village, and they still were able to defend themselves with a rock and one gun.
Yeah.
They defended themselves.
Yeah. And next door, and we can say, we don't have time to discuss the difference between a kibbutz and a moshav, but think farm town combined with neighborhood, because this would be like for Williamson County, like Tollgate, Canterbury, like that's how close they are to each other. And so this Kafar Aza is next to Ein Abzor, and they were 950 people. One of the first people killed was their guard, who was returning fire from the ground. But one of the guys coming in on the paragliders shot and killed him, and so they were able to blow open the gate and flood into this town. And another difference, by the way, so in a moshav or a kibbutz, is that they're all family. So what's the name of your neighborhood?
Oakwood.
Oakwood. So it's like Gabe and Micah grow up in Oakwood. Let's say they're 18, 19 years old, but there's a whole section of little houses where the 18 to 19-year-olds stay. They've got their own little places.
That'd be nice, actually.
I know. I was thinking this.
How can we figure that out?
Yeah, I know. It feels pretty good, right? One of the main places where of the 64 people that died, a bunch of them died in one little strip, and that was mostly 18 to 24-year-old single males and females. And this first clip that I want to show you, I cannot remember his name. He's actually from Namibia, but he's Jewish. He's lived in Israel now for, I don't know. And so when he's in his village, okay, he left with nothing but the clothes on his back. The clothes he's wearing were from donated. And he's about to describe a story of a 17-year-old kid named Toman that is kind of infamous now inside of Israel, but we'll play that and then we can talk about it.
The children are very, very traumatized. My grandson, who's 17, lost his best friend from the neighboring kibbutz. You may have heard the story of a guy called Tomer, 17-year-old. Yeah. My grandson's best friend, and they were together on Friday night. On Saturday, he was dead already. He was taken at gunpoint by the terrorists. They'd knock on every door and tell them, you need help. It's Tomer. They, of course, recognize him. They all open the door. They killed them all, and ultimately tried to get away, and they killed him too. So my 17-year-old son had
They used him to open the doors because people close in the house. Yeah. And what they did also, they took this is the room. They have balloon of gas.
Gas cylinders. Yeah.
They took them, opened the gas, threw it into the salon, and then after a minute threw a hand grenade. And then the house exploded. If you didn't open the bunker, you died in your
smoke inhalation.
And then there were use of spare tire of the car. Yeah. They found your keys, they went out, parking your car, they took out the tire, burned it, and roll it into the salon.
Black smoke kills you.
Yeah.
So,
17 years old. Okay, my son is 18, barely 18. And to put it in perspective, they're being attacked, and people are now locking their doors, and they're in their bomb shelters. Every home has a bomb shelter. In fact, they said that they don't do sirens in southern Israel because you have 15 seconds from the moment that that a rocket is launched to get to safety, and a siren takes 2 or 3 seconds just to get ramped up. So you've already lost 2 seconds, right? So all they have is like a loudspeaker that basically is in Hebrew saying code red, code red, code red. So they are in their bomb shelters, which don't lock, by the way. This was so unimagined by Israel, and we can talk in a minute as far as the failure of imagination as far as Israel goes. And we'll let a couple of the Israelis speak for that because they did. But they literally never imagined this. Like they would come through with weapons and just open fire like this. So they were prepared for bombs. So they were coming into the village. This kid Talman now, so people are locked in. Nobody's answering the door because they don't want to, there's terrorists outside. So they capture this kid who's 17. So now imagine my son Ethan going next door to my neighbor Glenn and Vicky. They're not going to open the door for terrorists, but if it's Ethan saying, I need help, I need help, I need help, they open the door and then they kill the people. They did this to multiple homes with this kid and then rewarded him by killing him as well. Like that was just one story that we encountered when we first, in fact, that might have been the first story they told us.
Using him as a human shield, essentially.
Yeah, as bait.
They're doing that currently, and they did it then. They literally use people as human shields.
Yeah, and inside of the Islamic religion, we take this for granted that all life being precious, all life being created in God's image, that's a Judeo-Christian idea. It is not an Islamic idea at all, which is why, slavery is still legal in Muslim countries, a lot of Muslim countries, because in a weird way, it would be like saying outlawing in our world. This is going to be a stretch maybe, but we don't eat animals here because our religion says no, but our religion is fine with it. I had steak this morning. They almost think of it like that. Like it's like they are less than human. So even their own people, they murder regularly, abuse their women regularly, and not as an affront to Islam, but as a part of Islam. So they're not looking at this as like a violation against human rights. They don't even know Islam doesn't really recognize human rights.
Yeah, I mean, I was in a brick kiln literally the week before, seeing this. I mean, we were in a kiln and we were freeing families. So I actually have images of a kiln owner counting dollars for the families that they were freeing.
That we're purchasing
that
from
we are
them.
purchasing
Yeah.
from them, purchasing their freedom, right? And we went and we helped them pack up their gear and leave. And we had to basically quickly get off the kiln because the kiln owner was mad at us for freeing them, mad at us that we were there, and wanted more money. And so the guys, the locals that we were with who were kind of protecting us, they were like, we need to get out of here because if we don't, like within minutes, we were told basically that we couldn't stay in certain areas within longer than 45 minutes. Otherwise, it can get really, really dangerous, really, really quickly.
Yeah, word spreads.
Word spreads, yeah. So, but your point is that like human life is not seen as equal. They're not seen as equally valuable in these places.
Yeah. And by the way, your Muslim friends in your neighborhood, a lot of Western Muslims, do view human rights as equal, but they can't use the Quran to justify that. Like you can't turn to chapter and verse in that. It's something that we assume, especially if you're secular, that is just normal, but it's just not. It's a Judeo-Christian idea. And so, yeah, this kid Taman, 17 years old, was slaughtered in the name of Allah to advance their cause. And so we go from Talman's house to this young lady, and I don't want to forget her name because the names matter. Her name is Ophir Shoshani, and she's 24 years old. And this is just a quick summary of what happened to her and in her home. And I've got a 22, 24, 26-year-old daughter. And hearing these stories, these wrecked me.
Weeks to recognize her. Her body just melted.
She was burned so badly they couldn't identify her.
They brought pathologists to try to understand.
Okay.
Sometimes there were two bodies.
And she
together.
was also one of the leaders that led this amazing event every year that we have in the South, and it's the
Ramadan.
the Ramadan,
the flower.
the anomalies. Okay,
The
she was one of the
anomalies.
organizers of this festival. It's a 3 weeks festival. Guys, this is music to my ears. I don't know what about you, okay?
No, but also
And I
you
would
have to-
prefer to listen to every minute to one of those because when I don't hear that, it seems like we're in a problem.
Also something in order to identify the burnt bodies and everything, they had to bring they brought in archaeologists because the archaeologists have special gear to sift through the debris and found body parts. Then they went for DNA testing, and this is how they found out whether they are burnt dead here or unfortunately taken into Aza.
Wow.
We're going this way, please. Folks, follow me this way.
So this is where she lived. That's where she was murdered. It's evil. Hey, Caleb, could you skip ahead to the one that's titled "Bombed Out Building"?
And those bombs, like just even the sound through headphones.
Yeah, they were kind of loud.
And that's IDF. Is that Iron Dome?
Nope.
Those are just mortars being fired off.
Yeah. So what was happening was you would end up like an Apache helicopter right over the top, and there would be two explosions usually. One was the one of the munition firing from the helicopter, and then 15 seconds later, whatever, you would hear it land on its intended target. But yeah, when you've got it like literally so like the helicopter was so on top of you that like it could just drop a rope and pick us up and take us up, firing from there. And the guy, and we're going to hear more from this guy's name, Colonel Grisha, 25 years in the IDF. He was a mayor in Gaza City. He lived there. He was the last Israeli to leave Gaza when it was turned over to them. So Gaza has a very complicated place in his heart. So when he says this is music to my ears, what he's saying is if we don't stop this, and we'll hear from him in a moment, they're coming back. They have made it perfectly clear what they wish to do by telling us and showing us. And they, speaking of Hamas, and I might add, 5,000 at best estimate civilians from Gaza that came in as well. So there were Hamas soldiers, and there were 5,000 Gazans who were raping and pillaging and stealing. And the reason I ask you to skip ahead, and then we'll go back to that video in a minute, but this is inside of Miss Shoshani's home. And so what happened, the reason that her body, in their words, melted, was they threw a gasoline can. He called it a balloon. They're English, right? Like a balloon of gasoline, but it's a gas can open so that it's spilling all over, and then they drop a grenade in there. And this is the inside of her home. This is what's left of it.
This house that I'm in right now was home to I think she's 24-year-old young lady. I guess you can kind of see there's bullet holes everywhere. And then they threw gasoline inside of here and threw a grenade in here and detonated it and brutally murdered her here. This is evil.
So what you're seeing on the walls, and there were bullet holes, but what really you're seeing is the shrapnel from a grenade that just incinerated the inside of that. I mean, it was about as big as this podcast studio, that room that I was in. And so when they found her, and so wild because, the archaeologists that they use for studying history, that's who they brought in to find and identify.
You want to talk
bodies.
about the markings on the actual doors and the
Can you
buildings?
remember what those were?
Yeah, there was like several, and I have it recorded somewhere.
Sure.
So eventually, when a lot of the content comes out, you'll see it. But basically, they had several different markings. One was that IDF had come in and had checked the building and made sure that there were no booby traps, because what they were doing is some of the dead bodies, they were actually putting booby traps inside the bodies.
Oh my.
Yeah.
And so they were blowing up anybody that was checking bodies. So the IDF had come in and checked that the bodies had been either, they basically had figured out there was no booby traps, that the house was clear. There was another marking for another organization that came in and was able to remove the body and all of the body parts, because part of their religion is that everything has to be pulled together. You're buried with all of your bones.
Yeah, everything has to be buried. Yeah,
everything. So there was an organization that checked that. There was an organization that came in and I believe helped clean up some of the blood.
Well, you have to remember, I'm just remembering this now, they would wipe the blood from the walls and the floors because the blood is part of the body and would be buried with the...
Interesting.
So it was cleaning, but it was also the ritual of their burial to make sure that it was all...
Does that have anything to do with like Old Testament, like, was it Joseph's... Yeah, you're testing my Bible knowledge.
Yeah, your jet lag Bible knowledge.
Is Jacob or is his dad is like wanted to be buried back in... I don't remember. Anyways.
It was, I think what you're alluding to, they view their resurrection, in fact, the Mount of Olives is like primo if you're going to be buried, because their Messiah, they believe, is going to come there. And so the cemetery there, everybody's feet are pointed towards the temple, because in their religion, it is when their Messiah, Mashiach, comes
through that gate.
They'll be resurrected, and their feet are already facing towards the temple, so they can walk faster to it, which is why it's prime real estate, because they'll be the first ones at the temple. But yeah, the idea is honestly it's not unlike a Christian ideology. If you think about it, for years, you guys don't know this if you're younger, but the idea of being cremated was unthinkable, because what about your body at the moment of resurrection? I remember as a child, like that was, and of course what we know, what Paul says in Corinthians is your body is like a seed going into the ground. It's whatever is resurrected, just like a seed, is going to be way different and better than just the seed. But point being, your body is just a seed. But in that religion, that was important to them. So they literally had teams, and it took a long time, obviously. I mean, they were finding body parts, and then they're trying to connect via DNA. Does this finger go with this body, or does this sternum go with that body?
It was just so surreal seeing the buildings destroyed and how they were destroyed, seeing shoes on the ground, seeing shoes of Hamas terrorists, like their shoes were on the ground as well. Seeing there was a video in the teaser that we played on Sunday of a child's bicycle that was completely rusted and completely burnt to a crisp. And just seeing this imagery, it felt very much like I was a video game player as a kid. So Fallout, like it felt like playing Fallout. It felt like this apocalypse, right? Dystopian apocalypse. And then seeing the markings on the walls, it was just like this surreal thing of like, okay, they were Czech, they were, all of these. It was just, it's wild.
That's true. Each one had a separate one, which in America, there's a same in disaster relief. They'll do that on the walls. Here's how many bodies are here. Here's how many people died. There's numbers. There's systems. And this is in Israel. There were a couple extra systems. The bombs have been taken out. The bodies have been taken out. Like each one had its own.
So what is kind of moving along here a little bit? What is the solution? What is the Israeli solution? Like what's...
Well, let me before we do that, I do want to share one more, because this was a story of these twin babies that are, by the way, alive.
Wow.
This got to me personally because I'm an uncle of twins.
Yeah.
Twin boys.
So the parents are murdered, and what do little babies do? They cry. And so the terrorists, the only reason they're alive, is that the crying babies would lure in IDF soldiers to try to save them.
Again, more bait and switch.
But that's the only reason they're alive. But here's our Namibian friend, I'm kicking myself because I can't remember his name, sharing that story. And by the way, this would be like in your neighborhood, half the family's in there. This would be like you talking about the Mayfields, or like these are your people, your family, your friends.
But you see what happened to the house? It's not no roof anymore.
So so Ralph, this house here, a mom and a dad were murdered, and this is where they're babies.
This is the house where this young couple lived. We just had two twins, just about a year old. They were both killed. The babies, I think the mother hid them, but they started crying.
And then the terrorists said, wonderful bait, we'll sit around here, hide in the trees, and wait for the army to come. And the army came, picked off the soldiers, coming to get the babies. Eventually they killed the terrorists, but it cost a couple of lives. Everything costs lives, everything costs blood.
There is a picture of an Israeli soldier carrying the...
Everything costs blood was what I wanted you to hear. That struck me. So everything costs lives. There is no solution. There's only trade-offs here. And the cost of blood is the cost that they're going to pay. I was listening to an interview with, this is random, but Taylor Sheridan while I was there.
Yeah.
Joe Rogan Experience. And he said, he was talking about one of his films that he made or whatever, but he used this line that in luck is not something that exists in the wild. Luck is only something that exists in the city.
Wind River.
What was it?
Wind River.
Oh, so you know this.
Oh, yeah. It's a great movie.
Yeah. Well, the line was like, oh my gosh, that's right. Because it's just luck. Is my car going to be stolen or not stolen? Am I going to, whatever. It's just luck. But in the wild, it's not. They don't kill the unlucky. They kill the weak. And so in the wild, it's you either survive or you submit. Those are your only two options. And I was listening to that thinking, oh my gosh, that's Hamas right now. You have two options, survive or submit. And survival is going to require blood. It's complicated. It's like I've read All Quiet on the Western Front. I understand how war and what what I know right now is that if someone's going to bleed, and it's either going to be Hamas or it's going to be Israelis, and Hamas has made no secret. By the way, neither has Hezbollah or Fatah or any one of these West Bank government. They've made no secret from the river to the sea. They want to eliminate every Jew from the land of Israel, period. And so you're either going to submit, right, or you're going to survive. And what was striking to me was most of the people that we encountered living in southern Israel, it's so different than, say, Jerusalem. Most of the religious people do not live on the Gaza border because if you hold to a Judeo-Christian worldview, you understand that evil does still exist, that you can't negotiate with a rattlesnake. You just don't. So a lot of who was on the southern border were secular, what we would consider secular progressives, which is why a half of a mile, a kilometer from the Gaza border is a festival happening that would absolutely offend the Hamas leader. Like that's everything that happens in a festival like that whether there's drugs or drinking or carousing or whatever, they hate that. But if you're secular progressive and you think, well, we'll just be nice to them. If you remember President Obama, hey, we'll just send Iran a $400 million, Walter White pallets of cash plane, and then they'll be nice to us. And what that resulted in is where we are now. And in a minute, we can even talk about what Israel, one of the mistakes that they've said they've made. But that's the survive or submit, right? And that's what you're asking. What is going to have to happen inside of Israel? And in short, what has to happen for Israel to survive is these extremists inside of Islam are either going to be they're either going to die or they're going to have to change their ideology or they're going to win. So it's survive or submit. And that includes Palestinians themselves. And I don't know the answer to this because what I do know is if you're in elementary school in Gaza, Jordan, Jericho, whatever, part of your curriculum, and this is not like a secret, is how evil the Jews are. They're evil. They're monsters. So they are literally raised to hate Jews. So the answer is it Hamas versus Palestinians, whatever. The truth is it's all wrapped up into one. But the Palestinian people are going to have to make a decision of whether they are going to vote for Hamas again, keep them in power, or that they want peace. And right now, so far, that's not been what's happening. The people in power, even though maybe Hamas might be a minority, they were voted in with 50 to 60% of the vote of the Gazan people with it. And so Colonel Grisha, this video here is that the fence right behind us is the external fence of the village of Kafar Aza. No, this is a different one. This is a different village. Anyway, but again, that's Gaza right in the background with it. So we're standing on the Gaza border talking to a guy that for 25 years gave his all to creating a society in Gaza and was rewarded by hundreds or thousands of his people being raped and murdered and pillaged.
The one thing that, just to add to him, that was really, really interesting was that he loved the Gazan people. Like you could tell, there's a young man that's literally named after him in Gaza right now. And so this was not his passion, his anger was from a place of genuine sadness.
Deep betrayal.
Because he spent this guy, he was the last mayor there. He was deeply involved in that world. He loved those people. He had people would be coming, he would be on the border and they knew who he was. He had friends there. And so there was just a level of sadness that.
Is he Israeli or Palestinian?
Oh, Israeli, very much. Yeah.
Israeli.
And that's the thing that people don't, this is worth saying. They call this an open air prison. Okay. First of all, there's a huge border between Gaza and Egypt. So to call it an open air prison and to blame only Israel is again your prejudice is showing, right? Yeah. You need to pull your pants up, and so it's not an open air prison that's just Israel. But at the time of this attack, thousands and thousands of Gazans every day go to work in Israel.
There's $500 million, and that was being put into from salaries from Gazans coming into Israel back into they were living in Gaza, coming into Israel for work and going back. It was over $500 million.
Yeah, and that's just the labor, not including the fact that they provided clean water to them, they provide the electricity to them. I mean, all that was provided by Israel. But anyway, this is Colonel Grisha from Gaza border.
So this is the
Guys, you know what actually upsets me? Really upsets me? Because yes, I can understand the 3,000 terrorists that penetrated and flooded Israel. And what about the 5,000 civilians from Gaza? And that's what actually, I don't even to share what I feel about it, because I had friends in Gaza. I did business with people from Gaza. I helped people in Gaza. You know what? I can say it now. During Protective Edge, it was my responsibility to arrange all the international aid to the people of Gaza under fire, and I did it successfully. I saved personally 5,000 Palestinians from Sajaiya neighborhood here. Okay? I did it. I want you to find one BDS supporter that saved lives in Gaza. One pro-Palestinian protester that saved lives in Gaza. I did it. And I'm the enemy. And what makes me even cry during the nights is that the same citizens, the same civilians that I was dedicated to improve their lives, they are the ones eventually that raped our daughters, that slaughtered our sons, that beheaded our kids. It's the people who molested bodies of innocent civilians. So can we say that all of them Hamas? No. But do they all support Hamas? It looks like.
Yeah, deep betrayal.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the deepest.
Which is the thing that's infuriating is, so what he just described is what happened in 2007. Okay, Israel makes a deal saying, "Hey, this Gaza Strip, we're going to offer this to you. It's another one of the land for peace deals. You give us this land, we'll give you peace." It's happened over and over again. Israel gives them land, they get no peace. So they give them this land. But here's what people don't know, and what's not being, if it's being discussed in Washington Post, I've not seen it. When they say, let's have a two-state solution, okay, Palestinian state, Israeli state, the naivete, the stupidity of that is, who do you negotiate with? When Gaza was handed over, they had their first and final, what they called an election. Hamas is brought into power, which at that point was 100% a terrorist organization. And one of the first things they did was, I'm trying to think, let's make this American. Republicans and Democrats. Okay, so let's say the Republicans win. And the first thing they did was murder the Democrats, murder them, putting them on top of buildings, shooting them in the legs. Let's say a 2-3-story building. Shoot them in the legs so they fall off the building. And you know how it is, 2-3 stories, you're going to die, but not immediately. They were doing that to Christians. They were doing it to people that were accused of being homosexual. And they were doing it to their own people. These were Palestinians. And so when he says, I rescued, like IDF went in and rescued thousands of Palestinians from Palestinians and took them to West Bank or wherever it is they ended up. But to suggest that this is just a Jew versus Palestinian is ignorant. It's foolish, because inside of that right now, and even inside of, let's say, Gaza, there's Hamas, and then there's another organization whose name I'm honestly brain farting, who is like their crazy twin brother, and they're more violent than even Hamas is. So they're fighting each other inside of the West Bank, which is where Abbas and the PLO and the Fatah party rules. They've got factions inside of that are at war with each other. So my point being, Israel, let's say Netanyahu sits down to negotiate, and we're going to give you the two-state solution, which parenthetically has happened before. Arafat, 97, whatever. They've turned it down before because they don't Fatah, Hamas, Hezbollah, they don't want a two-state solution. They want a one-state solution, and it is Palestinian, and specifically with Hamas, or a very extreme version of that. But who do you negotiate with then at that point? Because I could sell the neighbor's land next door, but it's not my right to sell it. He ain't gonna. The deal doesn't count because
Right.
I don't have a vote in that. We have to do it together, and the Palestinian political structure is not even remotely in unity as to what they want and what they will settle for.
As we wind this down, one last question here, and I know next week we're actually going to dive in a little bit deeper into Islam, and as you go deeper into 1 John chapter 2, we're going to hit some more of these topics. But for the sake of today's discussion, to kind of put a bow on it per se, land the plane. What is the role of the church in this situation like this?
Mm-hmm.
Like what is a takeaway for the church, for a Christian in a time such as this right now in 2024?
It feels like much of the job of the church in general, wherever, is cleaning up the mess of the Genesis 3 world, building outposts of the kingdom. And I would say that we have 2, maybe 3 sort of simultaneous battles and conversations that are sort of loosely linked and yet mutually exclusive, if that makes sense. I guess they're all kind of hopelessly intertwined, but the first one is, we're just talking about, let's just say the Judeo-Christian, Western, whatever view you want to, the things that we take for granted, human rights, all being equal, like those, all Judeo-Christian values. Is that the future we want for our world? Or is the secular human version of that, or is it the Islamic version? Those are the 3 main competing visions for the future of the world. And so when you think about that, as a church, when it comes to elections, when it comes to positions of influence in our community, in our own country, that's why it's important. It's not Christian nationalism. It's a battle for an ideology. And that said, part of, you separate out, that's one of the, I think our forefathers were so wise, because the establishment clause, which is that the government doesn't get to force religion on us, that came from a very honest place from British, the Catholic Church and the King of England being the same. Like they separated those out. Islam, by the way, is a theocracy. There is no such thing as a secular Islamic government. It's all theocratic. So anyway, Judeo-Christian is one of the ideas. Again, you're right. We're going to talk about this on Sunday as far as anti-Christ in place of Christ. When it comes to, in general, the church, Jesus said, and we were able to see Mount Hermon from Mount Arbel. We were on the way to actually that area, and then Hezbollah began shelling, so we had to make a right turn, and we went to Galilee instead. But you could see, off in the distance, and you could hear the fighter jets But Jesus specifically said, "My ecclesia, my church, like the gates of hell will not prevail against my ecclesia." The word ecclesia is a Greek idea, and just like logos, whatever, like Jesus would take an idea that they understood and say, but this is yours, but this is mine. Ecclesia would have been like the city council, like the homeowners association. Like they're the ones that made the decisions for the community, and they would come into the ecclesia, and it does mean called out ones, right? That's the word Greek, but the idea, it was called out to lead the city. And Jesus is saying at Caesarea Philippi, at a place where demonic religious things were happening, babies being sacrificed, the god Pan, so Peter Pan, all that stuff, that all was born there. Jesus is saying this pagan religion, my church, right, the gates of hell will not prevail against my ecclesia, my called out ones, mine that are here to influence, to lead, that's what he was setting up. He wasn't saying the gates of hell will not stand against our little building, our little group or whatever, but my called out ones. And so we're the called out ones. And what we get to do, what we must do, is kick down gates of hell. Violence is a gate of hell. The people of Ein Habzor have an actual fence around them, and then they have a demonic fence of violence, of Hamas, we get to kick down those doors and say, we love you. We are going to provide for you financially if we can. And by the way, what they've said for the most part, every Jewish person that I encountered, we don't want your money. We want friends. We want to know that we're not alone in the world. And so what the church's role, what we get to be in our called out one, is to kick down the gates of hell in those areas. And we get to be friends. And if they, look, we get a chance to show them that the Passover lamb, right, that they have celebrated, the Passover lamb that they actually don't get to even celebrate now because they don't have sacrifice. And without the shedding of blood, there can be no forgiveness of sins, is what their Bible tells them. They can't sacrifice right now. So, their forgiveness level, we have a chance to say, well, you can be. This is your forgiveness. The Passover lamb, the Lamb of God who takes away the sins of the whole world is Jesus. We don't shove it down their throats. We don't shove it down anybody's throats. We just get to say that this ideology, whether it's Hamas or whatever, these will enslave you. The religion enslaves, Christianity sets free. So we get to speak, show them by example what the love of Christ really means. And frankly, one of the things that I'm seeing right now is the history of, whether it's the Crusades or the Inquisitions, the Spanish Inquisitions. Like if you're the average Jewish person, or the average Islamic person, by the way, you have a fairly skewed version of what Christianity is because of history of religious institutions that have violently, and by the way, I say this, I always feel like I have to say this because it's important. You can't justify what happened in the Crusades with the teachings of Jesus. Now, you can justify what happened in Ein Habzor with the teachings of Muhammad, okay? You can't with Jesus. So even the Crusades, that was a anti-Christ idea that happened. So we get to be Christ in the flesh to them and show them that we are their friends. They're not alone. That and it's why people are going to say, "Oh, what about Muslims? What about you?" We're setting slaves free in Islamic countries. We're setting Jews free, and it's Jesus. It's not a people group. It's a Jesus group, and so that's what we are doing. It's what we get to do. We're still seeking the Lord as exactly what that looks like as far as trips and what we do when we're there, but I know this: we're going to go back, we're going to keep going, and truth and lies, and we're going to tell the truth.
It's an incredible opportunity for the gospel right now. That is
Yeah.
for sure. Caleb, what's one final thought from you in this trip that you took?
I've been very fortunate to, which Darren gets all of the blame on this, to travel the world and see some of the things I've seen.
You're welcome.
It's definitely, it's changed a lot of the way I view my faith. It's changed a lot of the way that I tell stories. It's changed a lot of the way that I view the world. And I think before I had such a cynical view, and I even asked on this trip, I asked on the first trip that I went on with you, and I asked on this trip, like, what's the point in a lot of ways? Like, if we live in this fallen, broken world and there's nothing but destruction, what's the point in trying, in some ways? And on this trip, I feel like the Lord kind of reminded me of my name. Like, my name is Caleb. I am named after one of the 12 spies that went into this very land. Caleb went into the land of Israel, the same land that we were in, and he looked at the giants and he looked at God's promise, and he went back to his people and said, hey guys, them giants are not that bad. And so I feel like my job as a storyteller, as somebody who goes to these places, is to look at the giants, remember God's promise, come back to my people and say, we got this.
We can take them.
We can take them. And I look at Israel and I look at the places that we go and I say, we got this. It is worth doing this. And the thing that I told the story on Sunday, and that really got me, was that I was in a taxi car in Israel, in Tel Aviv, of all places, and then my taxi driver said something to me. He said, if the young people of the United States do not align themselves and support and create the relationships with the Israeli people, you don't always have to agree with the government, but the Israeli people, if they do not do that, Israel will not exist. The Jewish people will not exist. There's 52 countries that are under Islamic rule. There's only one country in the world that Jewish people can call home, and that's Israel. And so one of the things that I really realized is, like, we can have opinions on governments. We have opinions on our government. We have opinions on governments that, support slavery. I've seen all of it. And we're not hammering conversation around. There are conversations around the government. You can have opinions on those things, but we're talking about the people. We're talking about relationship. Jesus was in a time where the government was not super awesome, the Roman government, right? But he was concerned about the people and the relationships that he was developing. And so that's how I view Israel. That's how I view a lot of the stories I get to tell, which is the stories of the people, and showing in developing the relationship with them, sharing the gospel. Ironically, Enopsor is the gospel. That's the name of this town, is the gospel. Is worth fighting for. And those giants, while they seem crazy and terrifying, they're not that bad.
Caleb, thank you. Thanks for jumping in with us. Thanks for jumping in with Darren last week.
Always. Easy yes.
Can't wait to see some of the stories that you're going to be telling, that we're going to be rolling out over the next few days and weeks and months as we continue to tell these stories. If you haven't watched the podcast yet on the YouTube channel, we would encourage you to do that. Those of you that are listening, thank you for listening, like I said previously, but also consider maybe watching the podcast. We have several clips that we shared on this one. We've been moving our podcast over to YouTube as well. So Spotify, Apple iTunes, podcasts, wherever you download podcasts, and also our YouTube channel. Conduit Church is the handle. So go to youtube.com, search Conduit Church, and you're going to see all of our video content that we put out, including our podcast there. So we want to invite you to there, to YouTube. Hit subscribe. That way you know whenever we upload one, it's ready to roll. It's in your queue for you to watch. And we're just so grateful that you would tune in with us in that way. ConduitChurch.com, conduitmission.org. And thanks for joining us. Have a great day.